Today on Climb On, we are going to teach you how to measure your maximum strength and give you some tips on what load you should work with to achieve the maximum, redundancy intended, maximum strength of your life. So today on Climb On, don't miss it, folks. And here we go. The first thing you need to do is measure your maximum strength, okay? Maximum strength, in this case, we are going to measure as the maximum force one can apply. Why? Because in finger strength, what you want to know is the maximum isometric strength, okay? There is a lot of discussion about this, but we are going to measure it in a certain way as the maximum amount of kilos one can apply. What we do, right, in our case is to go to the peak load. We are going to go to the peak load, okay? Well, here, I had my curve, but we are going to start a new session. In this case, I am going to measure the right hand and the left hand. There is something to clarify before this. If you are going to do a maximum strength measurement, you first need to have warmed up and recruited properly. This means at least a few 15 or 20 minutes of warm up and recruitment before measuring maximum strength. In fact, what is called peak load, okay, is the fourth stage of the warm up recruitment. That is, every time I am going to measure maximum strength, it would be the fourth stage of the warm-up recruitment. You cannot measure maximum strength without having done a warm-up or recruitment, because first, the possibility of injury is very high if they are not well activated, because it will not give you the correct value. Because in a way, if you haven't recruited, it will probably be an undervalued result. Okay? That is, if it shows 30, without having warmed up or recruited, probably, it's not 30. Maybe it was 35, even 40. There are people who recruit a lot. There are people, I've seen it, people who, without warming up, they throw like as much as they can, jokingly or whatever, and then they throw and I don't know, it shows 40, and then they recruit, warm up and everything, and they go over 55. And that's important. That's waking up your muscle, waking up your central nervous system. So first, and you have to be clear about it, that if you're going to do a maximum strength measurement, you have to have activated beforehand, okay? In this case, what we do is measure right, left, okay? And here I could choose here in which of all these I'm going to measure. We will talk about that later, but we won't do it now, okay? And I press start session. I begin the session, okay? And here it will give me the left and the right, okay? Generally, I start with the right because it's my dominant hand, okay? But you could start with the left from this side. You need to be clear, and here I will show you that there is a force time curve, not force velocity, force time, okay? People get confused with the RFE. The RFE is a measure within the velocity curve, okay? But the velocity curve is what I am showing you now, okay? That is when I apply force and apply force to the maximum, I will do it with a speed. That doesn't matter what it is, but my maximum force, especially if it's isometric, will reach between 1200 and 2500 seconds. That's where my maximum force will be, okay? That's the maximum I will be able to exert. And from there on, it decreases. Okay, so when a maximum force test is done, you don't have 1500 milliseconds. I don't tell you that. That's 1.5 seconds. But if after 2 or 3 seconds, you haven't reached the maximum, that was your maximum, okay? And this is also evident. So I'm going to take here, and I'm going to do, obviously, a fictitious maximum force, just for explanation. So I prepare myself, okay? I tell the guys, in this case, something that is very important. The maximum forces, the ones I am measuring, are on a 20 millimeter standard edge. There's a lot to explain about that, but for now, let's leave our maximum finger strength at 20 millimeters on a standard edge, okay? So I arrive, or I'm prepared, right? And when I tell my student, are you ready? Everything else, I say, pull as hard as you can, not necessarily. the fastest, but as strong as you can, and avoid jerking, avoid hammering. What does that mean? Avoid doing this, okay? Instead, make it steady and continuous, because if you do that jerking, it can overestimate. That is, it can have a load and a force greater than what is appropriate. So I get here, I'm ready, okay? A short announcement. Finger strength and Tyndale course lasts 5 hours. Finger strength planning course lasts 7 hours. The videos are already recorded, so if you want them, you can buy and watch them immediately. And if you also want to train with me, just write to me on Instagram, whether it's for the Tyndale finger strength courses, finger strength planning, or if you want to train with me. And I say, all right, start pulling. And this guy starts pulling, and as there he can't go down, he can't lift anymore. So in this case, his maximum strength is 31 with his right hand. Then I go and switch to the left. I must not forget, because sometimes new people tend to forget. So I say, you're already ready on a 20 millimeter edge, and I'm ready. And I start to pull. Then he starts to pull. And there he can't anymore. So this, although it's a bit fictitious, is very similar to reality. In general, most tend to have more strength in the right hand than in the left, unless they are left-handed, okay? But most have a bit more strength in the right hand than in the left. In this case, that's what corresponds. There's always a small difference. I save this, save me. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Gigi Andy, nothing more, right? Gigi. No, I'm going to call it, better yet, I'm going to call it a climb. Oh, like the YouTube page, okay? Accept, save. And here I get the measure. I can press it, and it gives me the measurement. 28, as we have already seen, 31. I see the difference, which is 8.3. In fact, I can see the radius, and in this case, if there is a difference, yes. But if it's a difference of less than 8 po, less than 10, it's said to be a physiological difference. More than 10, there is already a difference. More than 15, there is definitely some problem, okay? Sometimes they are injuries. Sometimes it's just that the kid doesn't know how to climb well and always overuses one hand more than the other. There are many situations, we won't discuss them now. But we already know that the maximum load of the kid, his maximum strength, was 28.31. So what do we have to do now? I will just give one piece of advice. Obviously, these are not cooking recipes. There can be many differences and many ways to do it. I already know that the young man has a maximum strength of 28 in the left hand and 31 in the right hand. In my case, when people are balanced, that is, I say, okay, look, there is a physiological difference between one hand and the other. I use the weakest link. What does that mean? That the loads I am going to give to that person will be based on their weaker hand, okay? So in this case, I say that the maximum strength of this young man is 28, and I apply it to both hands, just like that. So I do here, a calculation. I go to my calculator and say 28 is his maximum strength, okay? So I must work to work on maximum strength, I must work at 80%, okay? That's what we're going to talk about. Here you have other videos where I talk about why 80%, what maximum strength is, fiber, etc. You can see that in another video. So there, sign up, subscribe, guys, because there's a lot of scientific information on this. It's Arndt's channel to share, okay? But let's continue. We have 28, and I need to work at 80% of my maximum strength, okay? So I multiply it by 0.8, which is 80%, and it gives me 22. Okay? So I already know that the workload for this climber is 22 kilos. So I go back to my Tindeq application, and in this case, I'm going to set this to endurance. Endurance means resistance. I know, but we're going to set it to endurance for clarity. You can also set it to repeater. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to set it to endurance now for clarity. But what we're going to set in endurance is a maximum strength workout. Don't get confused about that. So I go to endurance, mid-time calm, start a new session. I'm going to set a duration of whatever so it never stops, okay? I'll set it to, I don't know, 30 minutes. But actually, a maximum strength workout session should last between 10 to 15 minutes. That's, again, I explained that in another video. And here what I'm going to set is block target zone. I'm not going to use this. Why? Because my weak link was my left hand. Since my weak link is 28, I'm going to work with 28 kilos as maximum strength, for both my left hand and my right hand. And someone might say to me, why don't you do it differently? Because what I want is for my left hand, which is weak, to strengthen as much as possible, and my right hand will continue to strengthen, but not as quickly. So these two will improve, this one a bit faster, and this one will continue to improve, but a bit slower. So what happens if they are unbalanced? This will happen, they will tend to balance out, and that's what I want. I want my two hands to hopefully be as equal as possible to each other. So, since I know my maximum strength is 28, and I want to work at 80%, which gave me 22 kilos, what I do here at MBC, okay, is to set it to 100. That is to say, I am telling the Tindeq that the maximum load I did was 100. So they said, but no, Gonzalo, you just told me this guy did 28. No, I am telling the machine he did 100. Why? Because when I go to the percentages are no longer percentages, they are kilos. Now 10%. 10% is 10 kilos. Why? Because 10% of 100 is 10. 20% is no longer 20%, it's 20 kilos. Why? Because 20% of 100 is 20. So what I do, I will set this to zeros to manipulate it a bit better. This needs to be told to the team deck to please change this because it's super difficult to manipulate this. I'm going to send the video to team deck so they pay attention to me. Now then, the 20, I will transform into 22. I leave it at 22. Why? Because that is my maximum load at 80%. But there is something called the character of effort. I have to make the character of effort. It is hopefully low. I can't say that 22 is the average. 22 is the maximum. 22 times 80%. And for the lower load, I'm going to set it 3 kilos less. I'm going to set it, I don't know, to about 19, 18. Let's lower it to 18. So I already know that my load, the load that I have to bear is going to be between 18 and 22 kilos. Someone told me, and don't forget, hey, Gonzalo, it's 18%, 22%. No, it's kilos. And why kilos? Because at the top, it's 100. So those percentages are worked in kilos. And why? Because percentages are a theoretical situation, whereas kilos are a situation real. And when I train, it's fine for me to read the books and they say a percentage. I understand it and everything, the rest. But in real life, when you give someone a load, you have to give it in kilos because a kilo is the real measure that the climber has to use for the load used for maximum strength. So after that, to avoid any misunderstanding, I will start the session. Then here it gives me the time, which is a time that doesn't really matter, but it gave me a range. So now what is the time that the person should aim for to generate a load that makes it so that with the time forms an adaptation forms which improves their maximum strength? In this case, we are going to use 10 seconds. There is a lot of discussion about this. Some people talk about more. Some people talk about less. But I am going to make a very summarized point. The maximum metabolic time of the type 2B fiber is 8 to 12 seconds. And what we want to do is bring our fast type 2B fiber to its maximum, that is until it almost reaches exhaustion, but not to exhaustion. And that's why it's 10 seconds. Other techniques are being used, such as heavy repeaters, where 3 seconds, rest for 3 seconds, 3 seconds, and it also works. They work very well for recruitment and also produce hypertrophy adaptations, But my experience says that initially we have to use 10 seconds because it is the best, either a best way to produce a stimulus on the fiber type 2B, not just for recruitment, because recruitment is ultimately about neurons, not just muscle fibers, but to produce some structural adaptation in the fiber, to improve its amount of proteins, enhance its metabolism, etc., etc. And that's why we will only use 10 seconds. People might say to me, hey, I lifted this load that I just calculated. Don't you give seconds? I could lift for 15 or I could lift 17 or whatever. And I tell them, that's fine, but you're only going to lift for 10 seconds. Why? Because also there is a lot of research that says you shouldn't reach failure. You should stay below failure with a low effort level. So when I have already measured my load, in this case, remember it was 18 to 22 kilos, my yellow line has to be in that red band for 10 seconds. So I apply. I'm going to start with my hand. The same way, in this case, it's just an example. So we're ready, and I lift, and I stay in the band. Red, I can see the time. I started at 39, and I stay, I stay, I stay, I stay. And it's 10 seconds, and I release. And I immediately go to the other hand. So now I go and lift. And I lift. I had started around 22. So let's reach 12 and release. And release. And that was my maximum strength work. But that was one set. One set means right hand, left hand. That is one set. How many sets? In general, I am working, depending on the mesocycle, from 3 and just say they go to 5 sets, EOS maximum. How long should I rest between sets? Between 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. I am using 2.5 minutes because I think it's enough. It is supposed that the total rest periods are 3 or 4 minutes, but that depends on the amount of muscle, okay? The muscle fibers of the forearms. The muscle masses of the forearms are low, and besides, they are 50% slow fibers and 50% fast fibers. So this tends to recover much faster. It tends to recover faster. So I am using 2.5 minutes because the recovery, at least in forearms, 2.5 minutes is more than enough. Obviously, this can be individualized. There are people who might need less than 2.5 minutes, and there are people who might need more than 3. There are studies that showed that, in a way, people tended to seek a total rest time, and that there were people who really, for large muscle masses, 2 minutes was enough. There are people for whom 3 minutes was enough, but it seems to me that less than 2 minutes, at least in my experience, is very little. From 2.5 minutes upwards is sufficient. Here I can already measure the load. Let's suppose that I have already rested the 2.5 minutes and I apply the same force again. So I go, prepare myself and pull. I will pull for the 10 seconds as it should be. There, I pull with the other hand, and there, and that would be my second set. Let's suppose that 2.5 minutes have already passed and I go again. And the situations that can happen are that you got tired because the load is very high. So in that case, this could happen. I started at 48, but I can barely hold it. It starts to fall, and I couldn't hold it. And the same with the other one. It could be that I reach, pull, and I can barely hold it. It starts to fall. I try to lift a bit, but it falls, it falls, it falls, and it falls. And in that case, it is understood that by the third set, you were already tired. And in that case, what should be done is not only to lower the load of that set, but to lower the loads of all the sets. Why? Because in general, the situations where the most force is produced are from the second to the fourth set. So to be able to endure between the second and the fourth set, I need to have had a load that I can sustain throughout the entire session. So it might be that in the first set, I'm giving my maximum and manage to endure the session. And then in the second, third, or fourth set, I perform very poorly. And that also means that in real life, if I give them the load, let's say 18 to 22, theoretically, it should give me the load, and I go and throw, for example, this. And I don't reach it, and I can't sustain the load, and I don't reach it. And even though the number gave me 18, I'm within, but I can't stay within them. That also means the load is poorly executed. I already gave you a video. The number doesn't matter. What matters is the curve. And here I can stop. I'm going to stop. I'm going to record. I'm going to put here, climb, all, save, accept. And I can see all the curves. I can see the first curve, which was perfect, very good. It was super good. The second one, which would be this one, also went very well for me. But the third one, which let's assume I did later, went very, very badly. I definitely couldn't keep close. You can tell it's also very jagged. And this last curve, which is the final one, is a curve that definitely wasn't the one that corresponded. So this is a summarized way of how to work on maximum strength. There are many other ways to work on it, but this is the basic to understand how to determine your maximum strength, and based on your maximum strength, how to determine the loads to work on your maximum strength. All right, guys. How to use Tindeq with your monoball, in this case, the Block 2025, in its application. And I just taught you how to determine your maximum strength, and based on your maximum strength, what the load should be that you should use to do maximum strength work. Obviously, this is not a cooking recipe. There are people who have many variations, but this is more or less the global approach regarding maximum strength, work for maximum strength. Okay? Guys, if you like this video, obviously please. It helps me a lot, especially since I'm just starting out. A subscription, which I'm sure you'll do because we're going to talk about this much, much more, and you'll get the most out of your finger strength. A hug, guys.